Welcome back to Mini Movies. Today I will explain a romance and drama film from 2017, titled My Cousin Rachel. In the 1830s, socialite Ambrose adopts his cousin Philip when he loses his parents. Ambrose raises Philip as his own son, ignoring all of his friends' advice that the boy needs a female presence in his life. The dogs are the only women allowed in the house. Philip eventually leaves to study in the city, but he quickly returns because he dislikes books and prefers his life at the estate. Unfortunately, Ambrose grows old and sick, so the doctor advises him to relocate to a sunnier climate for his own good. Ambrose departs for Florence and maintains contact with Philip through letters, which are shared with Philip's godfather Nick and his daughter Louise. One summer, Philip receives shocking news. Ambrose has begun a romance with their widow cousin Rachel, which is strange because Ambrose has never shown any interest in women before. Ambrose and Rachel marry the following autumn. Louise teases Philip, telling him he'll need to find a place of his own soon, but Philip tries not to be concerned because Ambrose appears to have forgotten about his estate. The next few letters, however, start to worry Philip for real. Ambrose explains that he's writing when he finally gets a few minutes away from Rachel, that she's always watching him like a hawk, and that Philip is the only one he can trust anymore. Ambrose has become increasingly ill recently, and he believes Rachel is to blame. Ambrose also suspects Rachel is paying the doctor in charge of him to lie, especially since he was recommended by Rachel's suspicious friend Enrico. Inside the envelope are words pleading with Philip to come and save Ambrose from his own wife. Philip travels to Florence, but by the time he arrives, Ambrose has passed away. The house is deserted, and the only person present is Enrico, on whom Philip jumps to demand information. Ambrose died of a brain tumor, which doctors said affected his brain and made him violent and paranoid. Rachel vanished the day after Ambrose's funeral with all of his personal belongings, but she wants the Florence house sold. Rachel's lawyer, Enrico, offers Philip a copy of Ambrose's death certificate as well as his friendship with the family. Philip, on the other hand, does not trust him and swears vengeance on Rachel for killing his cousin. Following that, Philip returns to the estate, where the employees already refer to him as the new master. Nick examines Ambrose's will, which is still the same one he drafted 10 years ago, and finds no provision for a wife. This means that on Philip's next birthday, the entire estate will become his. Philip is surprised Ambrose hasn't filed anything in Rachel's name because he believes she murdered him for it, but Nick thinks he's hallucinating. After speaking with the employees and assuring them that nothing will change, Philip receives word from the city that Rachel has arrived in England. He decides to invite her to stay at his house, but he refuses to give her Ambrose's room because it is now his. Instead, he renovates an old, filthy room for her with the assistance of Louise, who offers to stay as a support. She clearly has a crush on Philip, and while he appreciates her company, he'd rather deal with this problem alone. On the day Rachel arrives, Philip goes horseback riding on purpose to make her wait for him, even ordering the servants not to serve her dinner until he returns. When he returns, he discovers that all of Ambrose's belongings have been sent to his room, and Rachel has gone to hers with all the dogs, too tired for dinner. He does, however, accept her invitation to visit after he has finished eating. Rachel is a lovely young lady, and the first time she sees Philip, she is taken aback by how much he resembles Ambrose. Rachel surprises Philip in a variety of ways. She knows how to make tea and biscuits, recalls all of Ambrose's stories about the estate, and even makes Philip laugh with a joke. Philip is taken in by her kindness, but when the conversation becomes awkward, Rachel quickly dismisses him. As the days pass, Philip and Rachel spend more and more time together, horseback riding and caring for Ambrose's estate. They have lunch with family and friends one morning after attending Mass, and Louise is jealous of how close Philip and Rachel have become. Later, Rachel teases him about it, but Philip denies any interest in Louise, admitting that he prefers looking at Rachel. Then she changes the subject, mentioning that she has run out of money and may have to teach Italian to bored housewives. Rachel is upset and leaves the room after Philip makes a dark joke about widows pawning their wedding rings. The next day, Philip pays a visit to Nick and asks him to set up a monthly allowance for Rachel, as Ambrose would have preferred. Louise tells Philip on his way out that Rachel has easily twisted him around her little finger. When he returns home, he finds Rachel making a special tea that doesn't taste particularly good but is beneficial to one's health. She is offended, however, when she learns Philip has set up an allowance for her. Rachel finds this humiliating because it makes her appear as if she came to beg him for money when all she wants is to be herself. Philip points out that she never begged, and that as Ambrose's heir, it is his responsibility to provide her with a good life rather than forcing her to teach. Rachel does not dine with Philip later that night, but she does send an apology note. Philip pays her a visit in her room, and she tells him she'll accept the allowance but will find her own place to live. This is unacceptable to Philip, who reminds her that she is Ambrose's wife and belongs here. Rachel gives in and agrees to stay for a while, kissing Philip goodbye before sending him away. Rachel continues to receive mail from Enrico, which Philip decides to ignore for the time being. She also provides special tea to sick employees, which inspires Philip to do the same. During an afternoon of horseback riding, he decides to show Rachel the letter in which Ambrose accuses her of being his tormentor, but then he burns it. He admits he used to despise Rachel, but he's come to realize she's not the woman he imagined. After that, they finally dare to go through Ambrose's belongings, contemplating donating his clothes. The sight of it, however, is too much for Rachel to bear, so Philip consoles her through her tears. Philip starts planning a few surprises for Rachel because he wants her to be happy. He cuts his own Christmas tree and then goes to the bank to retrieve his mother's pearls from the safe, which no one has worn since she died. Rachel wears the necklace on Christmas Eve and gives Philip a proper kiss. They throw a party for everyone on the estate, eating, singing, dancing, and admiring the big tree. Rachel even brought a present for each employee. But not everyone is content tonight. After the party, Nick informs Philip of some concerning news. Rachel's account has already been severely overdrawn due to money sent out of the country. Philip refuses to believe there has been any wrongdoing and explains it by saying Rachel is generous, so he orders Nick to increase her allowance. Nick is upset about this and shares more information he's gleaned from asking around. The duel in which Rachel's first husband died was fought over one of her lovers, because everyone in town was aware of her affair because they were very loud at night. As Philip calls him out for believing gossip, Nick begins chastising him for stealing the necklace, but their conversation is cut short by Rachel. She returns the pearls to Nick, saying she's honored to have worn them but doesn't need to keep them if they'll cause so much conflict in the family. Philip still believes Rachel owns everything, including the pearls, so she explains that Ambrose never signed a will. She shows it to Philip, who recognizes Ambrose's handwriting right away and wonders why he started writing it only to not sign it. Rachel admits she was pregnant but lost the child, and their relationship began to crumble on that day. Ambrose became ill soon after, and Rachel felt as if she were living with a stranger who despised her and wanted to harm her. Philip, moved by her plight, assures her that she will always have a place on the estate. The next day, Philip takes the will to the bank to prepare for his upcoming birthday. Philip wants the majority of his wealth to go to Rachel as soon as he can legally dispose of it. The banker believes this is a risky and hasty decision, but since Philip will not change his mind, he persuades him to include a clause stating that the wealth will revert to Philip if Rachel remarries. Philip returns home after picking up some flowers to discover that Enrico has come to see Rachel. Philip must now observe them as they spend time together, chatting in Italian and constantly touching hands. Rachel notices Philip's jealousy and explains that Enrico is an old friend, so they have a lot to talk about, but he'll be leaving soon. When the new will is complete, Philip picks it up from the bank along with his mother's jewelry. Nick, as Philip's guardian, is required to sign the will as well, and he does so after failing to persuade Philip that this is a bad idea. On his way home, Philip rides along a cliffside path that crumbles beneath his horse's hooves, but he holds onto the ground and avoids falling. At the estate, night falls, and Philip waits for the clock to strike midnight in order to climb Rachel's window and spend the first hours of his birthday with her. He gives her an envelope containing the will to be read later and gifts her all of the jewelry, persuading her to wear the pearls right away. Shalii, Philip invites Rachel to spend the night with him, and she agrees. The following day, Philip prepares a picnic, but Rachel has left the estate to visit the city, so he waits for her by the road. When Rachel returns, she explains that she went to see Nick to have him explain some of the legal language in the will, and he was very gentle with his manners, even though she knows he disapproves of her. Philip takes Rachel to a flower field for a picnic and convinces her to get busy with him, but Rachel doesn't seem to be into it and acts distant when they're finished. Later, while preparing for his birthday dinner, Philip receives some of Rachel's special tea, which he eagerly consumes. Philip has a terrible headache with visions during the meal, but he concentrates on his family to announce his engagement to Rachel. Rachel, on the other hand, has no idea what he's talking about and feels embarrassed in front of everyone. Rachel explains to Philip after Nick and Louise have left that she only agreed to get busy with him twice to thank him for the jewelry and the will, not because she shares his feelings. Upset and perplexed, Philip grabs Rachel by the arm and then the neck to prevent her from fleeing the conversation. This causes the pearl necklace to break, causing Philip to see sense and let go of her. The next day, Louise requests that Philip meet her privately. She's been concerned about him since before Christmas, so Philip tells her what happened. He thought Rachel reciprocated his feelings, but he was mistaken. Louise notices an odd coincidence. Rachel was open to Philip before she read the new will, but she grew distant after Nick explained the special marriage clause to her. Philip disagrees because, even if the estate was returned to him by marrying her, he would share everything with Rachel. But this isn't enough for Louise, who points out that a wife isn't allowed to send money out of the country and must always be by her husband's side. When Philip returns home, he finds Rachel with one of her friends, whom she has hired as her lady-in-waiting because she no longer feels safe around Philip. Philip passes out in front of them that night. He awakens 5 days later, still ill with constant headaches, fever, and strange visions. Rachel sends her friend away and devotes her time to caring for Philip, sharing her herbal tea with him on a regular basis. She also occasionally rides a horse, which Philip inquires about. While Rachel does not specify where she is going, she does state that she will not be leaving for good anytime soon. One afternoon, Philip tries to distract himself by going through Ambrose's books and discovers a note from him stating that Rachel is greedily consuming all of his money at an alarming rate. When he feels better, Philip decides to follow Rachel to town and discovers her meeting with Enrico, who greets her with a quick peck on the lips. Later, at home, Philip confronts Rachel about this, and she admits that she invited Enrico to England because she needed his advice, but she does not elaborate. She didn't tell Philip because she knows he despises Enrico, and Philip proves her right when he demands that she send Enrico away. Rachel refuses, stating that she has a right to her own life and that she may even invite Enrico to stay here, as this is her home after all. Rachel grabs a fire poker to keep Philip at bay, threatening to summon the servants if he tries anything. Rachel has a nervous breakdown, saying she can't do it again, and Philip apologizes by hugging her. Later, one of the servants brings Philip a note he discovered in one of Ambrose's coats that had been donated to him. Philip tells Louise about it, and Louise reads aloud Ambrose's theory that Rachel has been poisoning him with her tea. He admits he's been a fool, but there's nothing he can do but observe Rachel's transformation into the lady of the house, hosting luncheons for family and friends. Rachel makes tea for Philip and Louise one afternoon, making sure Louise does not take Philip's cup. Suspicious, Philip declines the tea, stating that he isn't in the mood for it. Then Rachel says she'll go horseback riding, and Philip recommends the views from the cliff path without mentioning his accident there. After Rachel has left, Philip enlists Louise's assistance in searching through her belongings for clues. They discover a banknote thanking Rachel for returning the jewels, which will be stored in the safe until Philip inherits them again. There's also a letter from Enrico advising Rachel not to abandon Philip and to bring him to Italy so the weather can help his health. At that point, Louise decides to reveal some information she's been keeping hidden. Nick has done some research and it appears that Enrico is gay. Drowning in guilt, Philip rushes out of the house, grabbing the first horse he sees, but by the time he reaches the cliffside, it's too late. Rachel has fallen and died. Philip is now married and has 2 children with Louise. Rachel, on the other hand, has never left his mind, and he'll always wonder if she was truly innocent or not as his headaches continue to blind him. If you liked this video, you will also like the video appearing on screen. Click on it to watch. We upload new movies daily. Make sure to subscribe, so you don't miss any video. If you liked the movie, consider sharing it with your friends. Show that you care about them. Thanks for watching.